Welcome, everyone, to the first PA day here of our partnership with the Hamilton Film Studios. My name is Nathan Fleet. I run the Hamilton Film Festival and a new Hamilton School of Media Arts that's coming up. And we want to do as much as we can to educate the people here in Hamilton and surrounding area so that we can live here and also work here. This event is put on by the City of Hamilton, Hamilton Film Studios, the Hamilton Film Festival, and our sponsor, Picture Perfect Package, for providing the lighting here as well. Okay, so PA Day. PA standing for Production Assistant, and this is kind of the entry-level job on film sites, I believe. But we're going to find out that soon enough. So I'm going to introduce you to the panelists. If you don't have a pamphlet, reach to a seat nearby and it will have all the information here so that you can read up on who is speaking here. So starting here to my right, we have Mike Bruce from Aeon Studio Group here in Hamilton. Beside Mike is Stefan Kucher? Kucher. From the film world? From the film world. And then beside Stefan, we have Christopher Giroux from Vortex Pictures here in Hamilton. So welcome our guests here today to this panel. To right behind the mixed table there's a microphone. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask the panelists, if you could go up to the microphone and wait there, and we'll let you ask some questions, because we're recording this portion of it. So that we can release it later on, but you won't be on camera. So we put the microphone behind the camera so you can feel free to ask a question without having to be on camera. So let's get started. So Mike, what is a PA? When someone says, I want to be a PA, do they know what they mean when they ask that? What does that mean to be a PA?
I think, so just to say, I came from the union world. So when I became a PA, I was specifically a PA for the locations department. So I know that there's a bit of a difference between the union and the non-union world. So, my version of a PA was, a locations production assistant. So you're specifically there to help the locations department. But I think the overall sense of what a PA is kind of almost like a general purpose catch-all kind of assistant that can kind of float between departments and kind of it's meant to give you an avenue to kind of learn everything that goes on within the film world, and then it's a bit of a doorway into a path that kind of helps you figure out where you want to navigate to within the film world, sort of thing. You guys probably have a better sense of an overall PA definition as opposed to a locations PA. I don't know if...
That kind of summarizes it. I mean, I'm non-union, and I did a lot of years as a PA, and yeah, totally. It's like you fill in the blanks. Whatever the production needs help with, you help them with it. And you should also, you don't have to, but you should kind of gravitate toward a department as well that you may be interested. Like, it's your opportunity to be like, oh, I'm interested in being an electric, I'm interested in wardrobe, I'm interested in art department, and you kind of maybe give them a little extra help and start to take their phone numbers, if that's your goal, is to grow and to find the department where you fit. So it's a good, like you said, a great introduction to just be a general help to the production wherever they need it, and then also find out what are your interests and what department you jive with, because you may go into the industry like I did, more in the camera world, and then as a PA, I was like, oh, I really like hanging out with the lighting department, and now that's where I am professionally.
And how about you, Chris? What's your definition of a PA?
Yeah, I think it's just trying to understand kind of twofold, obviously assisting all the departments, because there's obviously PAs for kind of each individual department, and so it's kind of like where at the beginning you're kind of more of a general PA helping out with kind of more generalized tasks, and then as you kind of move up the ranks, it's kind of your responsibility as well as the productions to say, like, where do I fit in here? Like, where do I want to go? And it's like do you want to work in lighting? Do you want to work in art? Do you want to work in locations? Do you want to be a director? Do you want to be a producer? And it's kind of slowly navigating to say, if you're starting off as more of just a general production assistant, you're kind of helping the production in any sort of way, and then you're slowly getting more and more hyper-focused into one department, and then hopefully that's the department that, you want to work in the future.
And so, so a production assistant, a general one, can kind of float around, but there's production assistants that can be for specific departments.
Yeah, there's set PAs that help out mainly on set and kind of work with the assistant director team, and then there's PAs that help with the locations team or setting up a location, tearing a location down, setting up lunch, taking the tables and chairs and stuff away, and then there's PAs in the office, and then an office PA would work with the production staff or the producers, and they generally do more office tasks. So there's different kind of PAs. The term kind of just production assistant kind of blanketly covers the whole kind of entry level and kind of community, but there's vast different kind of pockets of a production assistant, and sometimes it's your past experience. If you've worked in an office or a more traditional office setting, then an office PA, because you probably know how to use like Excel and Microsoft Word and a printer, they might place you in the office to work with the production team, or if you have like a great personality and you're very energetic, they might place you with cast and to transport cast and stuff like that. And if you have a very good work ethic and maybe you come from a background that's more physical, you might be on the locations team or something like that, setting up tables and chairs and getting locations ready. So there's different pockets of production assistants.
And I think, again, getting back to the whole union versus non-union world, when you go into the union world, kind of, the most generalized PA would be like maybe the office PA, and they have the access to kind of the information for all departments sort of thing. And, again, like, for if you're going into locations, like it's very regimented, and you kind of stay in your lane. Like if you're a locations PA, you don't cross paths with the grips and electrics. You all are there to support each other. But at the end of the day, the union rules kind of dictate, what equipment you can handle, and how you can kind of like just the different protocols and that sort of thing. And as part of the locations department, that's kind of the easiest way to get onto a union set, because there's a position called an LSP, which is a location support personnel. And they're kind of, anybody. You can hire anybody for that position as long as they, have a bit of common sense and show up on time. You can go be an LSP, and that will get you on set, and that will kind of give you an overall vision of what it means to run a set and who all the different people are and how they interact, and then you can kind of pick a path from there. Whereas, with non-union, a good example, having come up in the union world, I did kind of dip my toes into the non-union world on different occasions, and coming from the union world, where it's like, again, you stay in your lane, you're a locations PA, you deal with the garbage cans and the tables and chairs, and so on occasion permits, and talking to neighbors and that sort of thing, and then I got onto a non-union set as a locations PA with a locations PA mentality, and I felt like there was not really anything for me to do, and I noticed that everybody was kind of looking at me like, why is this idiot just kind of standing around not doing anything? Like, grab a light. And I'm like, that's not my job. But in that world, it is your job, right? You're kind of there to help everybody. And there's different ways to look at it where, some people like the union world because they like that laser focus, and it's like you're there to do one job and kind of, come up that way. But in the union world, non-union world, it seems like there's a bit more camaraderie. It feels like there's a bit more, like there's a real sense of community.
Yeah, the lines are a little bit more blurred with the job definitions. They're a little bit more fuzzy.
Yeah. But nobody really, I don't ever see anybody complain about it. Like, people are just like, this is the way it is, and, everybody gets along or doesn't get along, depending on, but...
And in that sense, you can explore all the departments a little bit better, I guess, in the non-union world, whereas you are
and actually get your hands on
choosing that path. So it is nice with the non-union where you do get to feel out like what kind of types of people work in this department versus this department, and where are my abilities best suited. So
yeah, and I think that's a great value too. I think for any new PA coming up to like be able to kind of get into a world where you can get your hands dirty, so to speak, in every department, and really kind of learn it all. Because even if, once you pick a path, to be able to know what everybody else does, it just helps you do your job better. And then if you ever want to kind of navigate into a different area and become, head of production or, whatever, Chris, you came up through locations, didn't you?
I started as a PA and got into camera.
Oh, okay.
So I started in camera for 10 years, yeah.
That's amazing. And but, just, you would probably agree that now that where you are, knowing what everybody does, it's like it just helps you do your job.
Oh,
so much
absolutely.
better,
But
right?
it also kind of, as soon as you have a broad understanding of kind of what everyone does, it's the best because you get to figure out like what you're really passionate about, but also what you really don't like to do as well, right? So it's like there's
Very
different
important.
jobs that, require, different hours and different things like that and different kind of parts of your brain to kind of work, So it's kind of figuring out what you want to do. In the end goal, but also like what you don't like to do. I think I've done a little bit of everything except for acting and makeup. I think I've done about everything else though.
So that's interesting. The difference between like the union. To summarize that, you stay in your lane, you're in one department, and you stay in that department. And then in the non-union world, there's a little bit more flexibility where you might move around to whatever department needs help, extra help, you can work there. Now, one of the main questions that I get all the time, and probably is one of the reasons why you're all here, is how do I get my first job as a PA? So how does this happen? Where are these jobs posted? How are you finding people? I know that I was talking to Zach yesterday, and there were people saying, "Oh, find out who the best ones are in the audience because we need some PAs," right? So is it word of mouth? Is it job postings? It might be different from union to non-union. How are people here going to get a job as a PA? So maybe we'll start with you, Mike. You can talk about the union portion, and then we'll talk about the non-union.
Yeah, so I guess. Sorry, there is a lot of networking, and it's kind of like it's the type of industry where if you don't know, you don't know, and if you know, then you at least you have a target sort of thing. So there's knowing people. It's very rare that jobs will ever get posted. In any sort of job listing, newspapers or online or whatever the case is. On occasion, it's, they'll, like when it gets super, super busy, sometimes, the LSP companies will advertise for more people because, it's a very cyclical industry and sometimes you get a show where you need 100 people for, 3 or 4 days and then for the next month you need 2 or 3 people. So, on occasion when it gets really, really busy, they'll advertise. But generally, for the union world, it's mostly word of mouth. We get a lot of people coming through film school that end up wanting to, either get in as a PA or a camera department or, as an office PA. But it's really just kind of, man, like you gotta. I mean, things like this is perfect. Like I can give you all. 3 or 4 phone numbers that you could call that are LSP companies that I'm sure would be happy to speak to each and every one of you because we're headed into a really busy season. And, again, that'll get you on set sometimes. Sometimes you'll be, sitting on the side of the road watching 100 pylons and telling, the people who live in their house right there, they can't park in front of their house. And that's, that's part of the gig, right? But, as far as like, if you want to be like an assistant director or like anything else, like the path gets a little more difficult. And if you haven't kind of come through a film school world or know somebody that's already in the industry, then it's really just getting out to these events and meeting people. Next time you see a film set, you walk by a film set on the street, talk to people, find out what they do and who you can talk to, who they can recommend, because people love to talk about their jobs. People love to talk about themselves if they have time. And people are always willing to help out good people. So, many times, I've played poker with people and they're like, "Oh, I need a job," and I've given them a job or a number for an LSP company, and now they're location managers on massive TV shows, and so that's just how it goes, for my experience, anyways. I grew up wanting to be a rock star, and I moved to the city, and a friend of mine was like, you know, I was on welfare, and a friend of mine was like, go be an extra. And, you know, they'll pay you $7 an hour cash and feed you peanut butter and jam sandwiches. And I was like, yeah, I made it. And then I just started meeting people and kind of navigated that way. And I became security and LSP, and then moved up to PA, and then locations. I gravitated very early to locations. And I just, you know, for me and my lifestyle and the way I kind of navigate through life, it just really suited me and spoke to me. And so that's how I came up. And then I got into, you know, film studios. My love of real estate and film kind of led me to film studios. So, and now we just opened a film studio here in Hamilton. And so it's like the path is kind of what you make it, and it's never ending. But as a starting point, just talk to people. Just talk to people, show interest, show up, you know, live ethically, and you know, do good work.
And Stefan, how about you? What do you?
Networking is number one. Absolutely. It's all about who you know and those recommendations, and you're going to spend years building up your Rolodex, which no one actually has anymore. But the idea of a Rolodex where you're going to be hustling all the time, and it's exhausting. It's hard to sell yourself, but you have to, especially in the first couple of years, until you start to make those connections, and then your phone starts ringing. And then you will get to a point where you don't have to hustle anymore, and your phone's and you have the option to choose your jobs, which is nice. But you really do have to network. You have to be nice to the people you're around. No one wants a cranky person on set. It doesn't matter how good you are at your job. I'll take someone who's less qualified and nice to be around when you're working with them for months at a time, 12 hours a day. So your demeanor is extraordinarily important. Some things have changed, especially in the non-union world from when I've started. And that is, there is some online options where you can now, like Facebook, for instance. I Need a Producer Fixer page on Facebook is a great one to go to, and there's often postings about that. We're also in the time, I think, for my career anyway, I've been doing it for 14 years professionally, and I was doing acting as a kid as well, but the industry's never been busier as it is today. So we're actually in a really great time to break in. We cannot keep up with the amount of demand we need in the workforce right now, so it is an excellent time to be getting into film as well. But yeah, definitely all about who you know and those relationships you build.
And so, Chris, how do PAs get jobs on your set or in the non-union world?
Yeah, I think there's so many different paths. Like my sister's a nurse and my dad's a cop, and there's kind of like one way to become those things. You know, you go to the school, you graduate, and you become. I think like in the film industry, there's so many different ways to kind of like, you know, all of our stories are probably similar yet different, you know what I mean? So there's so many different ways to like get involved. Now there are, like when I started, there wasn't a lot of postings and stuff online, but now there's like I Need a Fixer, which is a Facebook group, I Need a Fixer producer. There's Lights Camera Hamilton, which is more Hamilton centric, but there's different postings. Monitoring those postings and seeing what's going on, even if it doesn't necessarily relate to the job that you're applying, but if they're looking for, you know, 15 different people in wardrobe, then you know that there's going to be other kind of postings kind of for those shows and things like that coming up, because they usually staff kind of a key position first and then they kind of work their way down. But the industry is never been busier, so it's such a great opportunity. And with kind of once you're kind of in the door with, you know, a positive attitude and a good work ethic, you'll move up fairly quickly, probably much quicker than we moved up, because there was not as many projects being shot and produced when we were kind of coming up. So it's a great opportunity to get involved. Like I know a person who started as a PA last summer, and she's a third AD within a year, which, you know, is like crazy, but it's because she had a good attitude. She worked really hard, and you know, she really brought her game to the sets that she was on. So she got promoted very quickly. But just getting involved and you know, a great kind of introduction, even though it's kind of unpaid, is the CFC. They're always looking for volunteers in different positions. The CFC very rarely actually pays crew. It's an organization run out of the city of Toronto, but it's a fantastic organization, and I've volunteered numerous times. But that's a great way to, like, also get involved, but not necessarily as a PA. You could get involved in other ways and things like that, and volunteering, and they'll kind of give you some training and things like that. So there's different organizations. If you're willing to volunteer, there's paths. If you're looking for financial compensation and things like that, there's different paths now. So there's so many different avenues now to get involved, and once you kind of get that momentum, then the jobs will start coming to you.
I just wanted to add too, like another good thing too for the just listening to you speak brought it to mind. If there's any because of the shortage of industry workers, and because we cover virtually every career path that you can find in the real world, there's generally a direct job kind of within our industry, like accountants or truck drivers or carpenters. So if anybody has a skilled trade, or especially accountants, like it's unbelievable the shortage of just payroll accountants, which I use the term accountant very lightly when it comes to payroll accountants, because generally it's that's kind of like a good place to get in for accounting. But if anybody's kind of still wanting to get in the industry, but maybe you don't want to go the PA route and you have a skilled trade, or I would suggest calling the unions like the Directors Guild and IATSE, and just ask them, like, where's your shortage? Here's what I got, and see what the path is to become a permit and start getting in your field within the industry, sort of thing. So.
And staying with, I guess, the union versus non-union, if someone was to be hired as a PA, aside from being a volunteer, what kind of wages can someone expect from entry level?
Well, do you want to go? Go ahead. On the union side, again, it's very, like, it's all kind of spelled out very, very directly and very bluntly, like what you're entitled to, and hours and meal breaks, and even what you're fed, and when you're fed, like all that sort of thing. And so like at the very kind of entry level, as an LSP, there's a tiered system within the union world, sort of thing. So generally the big budgets and there's different metrics on how you judge what a tier A series versus a feature film sort of thing. But the reality is that, like, as far as the DGC, which covers location support personnel, if you're on a tier A show, you're probably making, I think it's up to $17.56 an hour. Yeah. And then it drops, from there down to, I think, there's a tier F, which is basically, minimum wage. You can't go any lower than that, sort of thing. And then as you kind of move up, then there's as you get into, like, to become a locations PA. So again, if you're on a tier A show as a locations PA, you're either on as a daily, which I think is around $350 or $370 a day, or you can be a weekly, which I think on a tier A now is up to $1,600 or $1,700 a week, and and they feed you, and in certain cases for PAs, sometimes they'll provide vehicles, but most of the time you're maybe driving yourself, and then you're responsible for the equipment on the cube truck, which locations PAs used to drive, and now transport has said no, it's a vehicle, it's a truck, we drive it, and that's kind of that whole stay in your lane thing. And then there's all kinds of there's RSP contributions that they match, and there's there's health and welfare benefits that as the more you work, the more the higher your level of coverage goes, and that sort of thing. So,
just to jump on that, a driver's license is huge, really, really big. That's it.
For the non-union world, for the non-union world, you got to have a driver's license. But for kind of the rates of non-union world to union world, there's a big tiered system, like from top A, kind of more commercial projects, which would be like your Suicide Squad, your Incredible Hulk, your Murdoch Mysteries would all be like kind of a tier A, and it goes all the way down to kind of more independent music videos and productions and things like that. So sometimes you'll hear a term called flat rate, which is, you get $100 for the day, and it's a flat rate whether you work, 8 hours or 12 hours, or it's a flat rate of, $250. That would be your more like very like indie projects when you hear terms like flat rate. And then, that's kind of very standard for kind of starting out. And then there's, you start to go by more by hour, and then when you go into the union world, you're guaranteed so many hours, whether or not you work them or not. You most likely will work them, but whether you work them or not, you're kind of guaranteed, like, hey, a union show called me, it's a tier B, I'll be making X, and I'll be guaranteed 8 hours, and then anything after 8 is, time and a half, and so on and so forth.
And in locations, it's 14 hours. So
14 hours minimum.
Yeah. Your daily rate covers 14 hours,
Right.
and then after that, you go into double time. So your 14-hour rate is, there's a time and a half is already baked into that, and then you get pay through lunches, so which means you don't actually get a lunch break, but as per union
But
rules,
you get more pay.
you get more pay, basically, and then you after 14 hours, your pay gets accelerated, to double time, triple time, and yes, it happens often.
More often than not.
So if it's a good way to make a lot of money, but you really, really need to focus on a good work-life balance, which I think now, because of how busy it is way easier than when I started. When I started, it was, I would work every minute of the day because I didn't know if I was going to get called again because it wasn't booming the way it is now. So you guys, anybody getting into the industry now has it a lot better. And that's generally the way you hope it always, any industry always goes, is that it gets better for the next generation sort of thing. But yeah, you really have to, you can burn out fast in this job, like really fast and really hard. It's like, they call it a divorce maker. It's like, it's, unless you have a very understanding spouse, like you really have to be careful.
And that's why I think, getting involved, figuring out what you want and working towards that goal is the most important kind of element of being like a production assistant, is that you want to get in, you want to get a good understanding of how the whole thing kind of operates, and then you can start to navigate, like, hey, I'm really drawn to art, I'm really drawn to locations, I really want to work in the office, and then that way you can start to have more of a balance, because obviously as you move up the ranks, the paycheck moves with it, so you don't necessarily need to work as many hours, even though working in film in general is a lot of hours, but you can start to figure out where you want to be and what you want to do.
And try and keep the joy in it. Like, it's so easy, like once you kind of get over the initial, like, this is cool, being on a film set and there's X star, like that can very easily fade away. And for most people, it does. And, for me, it's like I still enjoy it. It's a much different experience, but it's very important for me to focus on remembering the cool bits of it and having that drive you beyond the money. Because if you get to a point where you loathe and resent the people you work with, or even the job, or just even for a while there, it was just the thought of going to a film set made my stomach turn. It just it can get to that point. So you have to constantly remind yourself why you're there, and really focus on the things you enjoy. And if it ever gets to a point where your stomach starts turning at the thought of going to work, take a break. It's so good right now because there's so many opportunities. Take a month off and go travel, or just relax in your backyard. You have to do that stuff, or you will not survive. You'll age 20 years in a day, and it's just not a good way to live, sort of thing.
So it sounds like there's opportunities to make money and then make a lot of money, but you have to be willing to also prepare for long hours. That's most film shoots are long, and so you have to your lifestyle has to kind of fit into that. One question that I had someone asked me before the panel is about if you want to be a PA, what clothing do I have to have? What kind of, do I need safety boots? What's the basic minimum that someone should be prepared to wear or not wear on a film set?
Proper footwear for starters. Generally, if you're working like in a studio or it's going to be, intensive, or if you're going to be lifting heavy equipment and stuff like that, like steel toe boots is a good start, like something that's comfortable. Kind of as you kind of get more settled, like even just carrying boots with you and stuff like that, but be prepared for like rain, sleet, snow, and everything. Generally, they'll give you kind of like a high vest to wear and things like that. Usually, but I'm not wearing it. A lot of PAs have like a little pouch or some sort of thing to carry like pens and markers and a small knife or something like that. You'd be amazed how often that comes in handy. Dress warmly, have a little backpack with like kind of an extra shirt or things like that. Like things sometimes get messy or muddy or wet or whatever, and everyone's kind of responsible for kind of bringing that kind of gear. If it's going to rain, dress appropriately. If it's going to snow, dress appropriately. Don't show up with like sandals, open-toe shoes, things like that. A good pair of gloves goes a long way. I'm a producer now, but I still carry a pair of gloves and a high vest and a knife, because if one of my guys doesn't show up, I'm not going to put a department out, so I jump in and I help, and I have that stuff on standby. So, always kind of having those things on standby, having a little backpack and things like that of things to bring, and just make sure you're comfortable, without like showing up in pajamas or anything like that. But make sure you're comfortable and things like that. The days are obviously long, and you want to feel good. You want to feel like you can really rock the day. So, if it's like 110 degrees out, like, bring sunblock, bring, a water bottle that you can refill. Obviously, there's water and stuff on set, but just have that stuff with you that, you need to take care of. The big thing also, like bring your phone charger, make sure you can have that charged. You might get a walkie-talkie, or people might call you on the phone. But the big thing is usually bring a phone charger and a battery. Don't go plug your phone in wherever. Nobody likes that. But just be prepared for the day. Anything that you think you would bring on like on an outing normally, if you're going to the day at the beach, you'd bring sunscreen. If you're going to be working outside, bring those materials. And everyone will get the day before, usually late, but everyone will get something called a call sheet the day before. That will have the weather, the scenes that you're shooting. It'll have a breakdown of the day. Read that, study that, because that's going to tell you that, okay, it's raining tomorrow, but we're inside. So I should still, as a production assistant, still bring all this stuff, but I may or may not be stationed inside or outside or things like that. So if you read the call sheet, you'll understand more of what you're in for, and it'll give you a better understanding of the day. Using that call sheet, then you can say, oh, I have to bring, X materials with me tomorrow to ensure that I will have a great day. Because, the worst thing to do is show up, get your feet wet, and then say, man, I got to work in wet boots all day. You know what I mean? So trying to just studying that call sheet, but then you're going to kind of come up with a little bit of a kit, and then that kit will travel with you wherever you go, whenever you go.
Yeah,
Is there a difference in the union? Is there a dress code for like union?
Mainly just with footwear, I think. Right?
Yeah, footwear, and I think that's relatively, crosses union and non-union. It's just like there's obviously, safety rules as
no
per,
sandals, no open toes, things like that. You get hurt really quick, and sent home probably pretty quick too.
Yeah, I always tell people, especially like LSPs or anybody really, like, go to your job each day as though you're going to be the only person there, and you need to survive the day completely on your own. Always choose comfort and functionality over fashion. If you can rock khakis and work boots, and that's all the power to you. But honestly, you'll have a much better go at it, because you might feel amazing for the first hour. Everything looks great. You're wearing your best clothes, and then all of a sudden it starts raining. You got to move 40 sheets of plywood in 2 feet of mud, and that's happened to me. You know what I mean? So it's like, just always prepare layers. Don't just buy the biggest, heaviest, warmest coat and expect that to do the job. Like, layer it up. You know what I mean? Have t-shirts, all the way from t-shirts to sweaters, hoodies, all the way to that nice thick jacket, and then you can adjust throughout the day. And wet feet, I've been there. Have 10 pairs of socks with you. You just never know. You know what I mean? It's better to be prepared, have it and not need it, than need it and not have it.
Because if you carry that backpack, you'll need it eventually. It might not be your first day or your second day, but you'll use everything in it. And you'll start to talk with other PAs, and they'll be like, oh, I have this like multi-tool in my kit. And then you'll be like, oh, maybe I should have a multi-tool. And then it's like, oh, the next person will say, oh, I bought these, work gloves. Oh, maybe I should have work gloves. And then your kit will grow. But you're so reliant on it because you're kind of like a person of a country sometimes. You're kind of floating in between. So if you have your kit, then you always know, like, oh, I have a sweater in case, or if it rains, I have a this or that, whatever. And it'll really help you throughout the day. But, dressing for the job, bringing the right footwear, if you're going to be outside, planning accordingly. It's kind of like just going on a picnic, like whatever you think you're going to need, trust me, you're going to need it. Maybe not on that picnic, but it's going to come up.
Yeah, and have backups of everything in your truck. Like, just have rain gear, have warm gear. I was just shooting in an abandoned school just down the street the other day, and it was like, oh, I'm indoors. It's going to be great. No, the boiler wasn't working.
Yeah.
There was no heating. Thank goodness I had my winter coat in my trunk, It's just like have every option in your trunk, and that's what's great, again, if you drive, is you can have a trunk available. And I carry bug spray with me. I carry sunscreen with me because you don't know when you're going to end up in a field full of bugs, and you're like, you're happy for that bottle of sunscreen, bottle of bug spray, whatever it is. But just have all those options available to you to make your life more comfortable. Yeah, and socks. Lots of socks.
Socks is probably the most important.
The most. I carry 2 pairs of socks in my laptop bag.
Yeah, it's so true.
We have about 7 minutes left for this panel before we take our first 15-minute break. If anyone has any questions, there's a microphone right at the back there. If you want to go up and speak into the mic and ask your questions. And I know you talked about, maybe offering some numbers or LSP companies that people can talk to. I think maybe the best way might be for you to give me that information, and I can forward it to everyone in an email. Rather than everyone coming up to you individually saying, what's that number, what's that number? So you can expect an email from me after. I'll gather that information. Before we wrap up, there's a few things that you mentioned that some people who are new to this might not know. Can you explain what DGC means, CFC, and IATSE? What do those terms mean? And I believe with the DGC, when you were talking about Tier A to Tier F, I believe those rate sheets are on their websites. Is that right? So you can actually go and look at what the rates are for all these things.
Yeah.
So can you just explain some of those terms, what they mean?
So the union that covers locations and ADs and accounting, production designers is the Directors Guild of Canada. And then there's different locals across the country. So we're obviously DGC Ontario. And there's a lot of information on the website. IATSE is the international.
And IATSE is IA. And there's different IATSEs for different unions, for camera, for grip and electric, for things like that.
There'll be an Ottawa one. There'll be a local one here. So
And then to a smaller extent, NABET, Unifor 700, which I think may be on its last legs. We'll see, but they're they typically do like the
more
lower
Canadiana
tier
shows.
Yeah.
And then CFC is the Canadian Film Center, and it's run by Norman Jewison, and it's like a 1-year intensive for spotlighting like the top 8 new coming directors, producers, editors, actors. There's different programs there. And so, for example, like I volunteered numerous times for them in the lighting department and camera department, but it's kind of giving the class, kind of like working on class projects, but it's not like normal school projects. They usually have a bit more budget and things like that, and you get to really network there because those people are the, in the CFC eyes, like the real up and coming kind of filmmakers to work with. So.
And don't feel too intimidated to join the union. I certainly did. It took me a long time to join. I still mostly do non-union. But especially with the demand, they are going to provide training. You're going to work under people. You're not going to be put in a position that you're not comfortable with. You do need set experience, so it's not like you can go in cold. So do get out there, do things like the CFC, build that resume. But even what you were mentioning earlier, you know, if you're a truck driver and you want to get into transportation, that can go on your resume. It doesn't necessarily have to be film-related experience either. So if you've done carpentry work before and you're trying to get into the CARPS program, that counts as experience. So don't think you're not
Painter,
qualified.
things like that. There's a lot of different kind of more trade jobs within the industry that you
Totally.
can move up faster.
And you might also, if you have a very specialized, unique talent, you might actually create a new, division of our film industry. Like there's people I know that fly planes and now are consulting on war movies. That just there's, if you can think it, like there's somewhere in the film industry for you. You know what I mean? And the other thing too with the union is where some people. They're hesitant to go union as they think once you're union you can't do non-union stuff, and that's not true. You can actually do non-union stuff. You can do anything you want, sort of thing. It's just like if it's like with the Directors Guild, you have to get dispensation to work on a show that would otherwise be covered by the DGC, but they've chosen to go non-union. So as a member, if you want to work on that, you have to get permission from the DGC to go work on it. Most times they will give it to you. But then with music videos and commercials, stuff that isn't covered by the DGC, you're free to go do that whenever you want. And there's some people that really like to go off and do music videos and commercials and that sort of thing. And then they do a show and they pick up a show and a union show. And
I always did both. I was part of unions and non-union, and it's just a more opportunity to work on more sets because there is no can't go union or non-union until you get more established. And then once you're a director or an art director, then you have to kind of make some choices about where you want to work and stuff like that. But when you're starting out, you can do both. You can do everything. You can do commercials, you can do music videos, you can do features, union features, non-union features, commercials, you can do anything. And, I wake up every morning, I'm like bursting with this industry. Like, I just love it. I love everything about it. And it's the most fun to work in. It's never the same. It's always different. There's always new hurdles, and there's no better feeling when you wrap a production, whether it's a one-day music video or like a 6-month show. You're hovering 6 inches off the ground once it's done. You have such a feeling of accomplishment because the whole organism worked together. And
that's that joy I was talking about. Like that's what you need.
Amazing.
Like exactly what he described. Like hang on to that. And if you lose that, then you need to find it again.
Totally. There's so many easier ways to kind of make money in the industry than working in the industry. But once you kind of get established and started, it's the most fun. It's so much fun to work in the industry. There's definitely harder days. There's definitely super fun days. There's definitely days that you're shooting outside and it's raining the entire day. And you're like, man, my dad was right. I should have become an accountant. But, it's so much fun, and the most important thing to remember is that when everyone is starting out, you're such an important piece of the puzzle, and you're not like a disposable person. You're an important part of the day and how the day runs, and it's everyone, whether you're the director or the producer or the production assistant, everybody plays a part in making that day happen. And I'm sure you'll meet people along the way that disagree, but they're wrong. It's like saying I'm going to drive a car, but it's not going to have any engine in it. Every piece of the puzzle makes sure that you make your day, you make your project, you make your film. And whether or not you're standing in front of a door saying, lock it up, we're about to go for a take. Like if someone was to not stand there and not stop people from doing that, someone could just walk in, ruin a take, and it's like thousands of dollars to reset, or it's going to now push us into overtime, and now it's going to be thousands of dollars in overtime, right? So, everybody plays a part, and the more passion, the more enthusiasm, and the best energy you can bring to set, the faster you move up, the better you'll enjoy your day. But other people around you are going to notice that. I know it's been mentioned on this panel, but I will totally take unexperienced with a great attitude over overexperienced and a terrible
100%.
attitude, because you can teach those skills. You can't teach a good attitude. And once you interact with someone with a bad attitude, that you file it away as a producer and you say, okay, great. Well, that person's never ever coming back because they have a terrible attitude. They're rude, they're mean, they're grumpy. We're all here for a long period of time, and working together is so much fun, and you'll start to move up very quickly. But it's the best industry to work in. It's so much fun.
And if you can roll with the punches and not take anything personally, like, you will encounter the worst people in the world and you will encounter the best people in the world. And depending on the hour, it'll be the best job in the world or it'll be the worst job in the world. And if you can just kind of roll with it, not take anything personally, and just stay as even-keeled as possible. Everybody's human. Everybody has emotions, and they boil up sometimes, and things happen. But if you can talk it out and just kind of maintain that cool, then you'll go very far. Like, you'll be, people, like Chris said, like, they'll call you over somebody else who's a jackass. And
I started sweeping floors in a television studio for a kid's puppet show. And I was the first person there all the time. I always used to beat the director, and the director, his name was Bill Bray, and he would always joke, being like, how's this kid? It was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was 16. And he would always joke, how did this guy get here before me? So then the director would try to come a little earlier and beat me, and then I would have to come a little earlier and beat him. And I did about 6 weeks on that show, and I was promoted. So it's like you start to get in a flow of things. You start to show up, and you have this really positive energy, and then you just become so integral to the whole part of the production.
Just to bounce off that, showing up on time, and more than on time, early, is so important. Like, really, really important. You will not be hired again if you're late.
The joke in the industry is if you're on time, you're late.
Yeah, you need to have like your belt on, your walkie on. When that call time hits, you're ready to work. You're not putting your gear on, so that definitely gets noticed.
We have we're out of time, but we do have one question, so we'll take one question and then we'll break. At the break, there's coffee and some snacks over at the table there, and then we'll start up again right at 11 o'clock. So we'll take this one last question.
All right. So, first of all the information that you shared with us today, it was very helpful. Thank you for that. And the question is, you let us know how important is our experience that could count for the film industry, but what about the educational background? It's necessary to take the film program or whatever?
It is and it isn't. I think depending on where you want to go, it definitely helps. Like, I went to film school. But a lot of my colleagues and things didn't. Some went to graphic designers. Other people actually went to become an accountant and now work as a line producer and things like that. So I think a lot of past experience always helps. Like in any field, if you went to film school or a program, there's going to be relatable skills. But it's really kind of twofold, and I think the industry has changed so much. When I went to film school, that I think you could just not go to film school and just start and work your way up. I thought there was a benefit of going to film school because I had a very specific end goal. I really wanted to be a producer within 10 years of graduating. And really produce, great projects. So I've been working in the industry since I was 15, and I started, really wanting to get into producing. So I took a 1-year program to really kind of fast track some of those skills. But the biggest experiences that I had were just working on a set. There's so many great programs and classrooms and film theory, and that's all very interesting. And learning the history of how they made Goodfellas is all super great, but getting on to a film set and getting there and mixing it up, there's no better education than just showing up and being thrown into the fray, in my opinion.
There's quite often I've heard people say, like, oh, you went to film school? Forget everything you know.
Forget everything you heard. But there's pros and cons for both.
Yeah,
for sure.
I did 4 years of film studies, a year of directing and cinematography at Sheridan. I don't regret it, but it's not a huge thing. You really don't need it, to be honest. It's more about your connections. And if you're going through school and you think, it's just a ride, you're not going to get anything out of it. The point of school is networking. And that's why I am here today. It's because of my Sheridan experience and because I met a gaffer. And it was like, but it was because I took that out of Sheridan. I took the cameras out of the room every week I could. I met the people working in the film industry. I connected with gaffers that got me on set, with producers that got me on set, but that was because of me. If you want to go to the library and learn, if you want to rent movies and study them and learn, and you want to go on Facebook and connect, you can do it and save the money.
And there's always somebody that's willing to teach you.
Absolutely.
So you don't have to go to an institution. It's like, if you want to be a camera person, get a camera and start shooting stuff.
Totally.
Start
Or be
going on.
a camera trainee, or work with different camera teams, and even just to volunteer, just to see what they do on their camera teams and things like that. So there's so many different ways to get involved. But if you're gonna go to film school, which there's definitely pros and there's definitely cons, I would ask yourself, what do you want out of that program before going to it? And if you're saying, I really want to go in, I want to make a bunch of short films because I want to be a director and I want to use those short films as my reel, then it is a good idea, because it's a safer place to make mistakes. You have access to equipment, you have access to other students that are just as passionate. Then you get to pair up with the cinematographer who really wants to help you direct, and you really want to help them be a cinematographer. So there's different pros and cons, but there is no like, oh, you have to go to film school to work in the industry.
I barely graduated high school, so it's
Well, thank you very much for sharing your time and your stories with us here. So thank you to Mike Bruce, Stefan, Kucher, and Christopher Giroux. Thank you guys very much for doing this. We'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll be back here for the second panel.